Most people do not ignore eggs because they are bad. They ignore eggs because they are common. And that may be the real reason so many people miss what they can do. A thing does not have to be rare to be valuable. It does not have to come in a bottle to matter. It does not have to cost a fortune to deserve respect. Sometimes the food doing the most for you is the one sitting quietly in your kitchen that nobody feels the need to praise anymore because it has been there all along. That is how it is with eggs. Before I go any farther, let me say this plainly. I am not here to diagnose you. I am not here to treat anything. If you have a medical condition, if you have been told to watch your cholesterol, if you are dealing with heart issues, diabetes, allergies, digestive trouble, or anything else that has your health already under someone's care, then you take what I say to Dr. John and you ask him what fits your case. That is the sensible way to do it. One video should never stand between you and the person who knows your body properly. Now with that said, let me tell you why this small, ordinary food deserves a second look. The mistake people make with eggs is that they judge them by how familiar they are. They see breakfast, they see something quick, they see something cheap, they see something their grandparents ate without thinking much about it. What they do not see is concentration. What they do not see is efficiency. What they do not see is how much nutrition can be packed into such a small space without fanfare, branding, or marketing language trying to impress them. There are foods that make a big entrance and do very little. And then there are foods that make no entrance at all and quietly carry half the morning on their back. The egg belongs in the second group. If you eat one whole egg a day, not 6, not some heroic amount, just one whole egg with the yolk left in, what you are doing is not chasing a miracle. You are giving your body a compact package of protein, fats, vitamins, and nutrients that actually have work to do. Real work. Not vague wellness talk, not fashion, work. And that is the difference between useful food and exciting food. Exciting food gets talked about, useful food gets repeated. You can learn a great deal about a food by asking one simple question. After you eat it, what changes? Not what was promised, not what was advertised. What changes in your day? What changes in your appetite? What changes in how long you stay steady before you start looking for sugar, another coffee, a biscuit, a pastry, or whatever else your hand reaches for when breakfast failed to do its job? For a great many people, that is where the egg begins to show its worth. A weak breakfast disappears. A sweet breakfast rises fast and leaves fast. A refined breakfast can make you feel as though you have eaten, but not as though you have been fed. There is a difference between those two things. Anybody who has ever eaten something light and pretty at 8 in the morning and then gone prowling through the kitchen at 10 already knows that difference in their bones. An egg, especially a whole egg, tends to stay with you better than people expect. Part of that comes down to protein. Part of it comes down to fat. Part of it comes down to the fact that it is real food and not a sugar event dressed up as breakfast, and I do not want to pass over that too quickly because it sounds smaller than it is. The person who is not desperately hungry by mid-morning often makes a better choice without even trying to. That matters. People talk about discipline as though health is all grit and no design. But sometimes the smartest thing you can do is arrange your morning so that you do not have to fight yourself before lunch. That alone makes the egg worth talking about. Now let us go deeper because hunger is only the beginning. One of the most important things in an egg, and one of the least talked about, is choline. A surprising number of people have never heard the word, which is remarkable when you consider how useful it is. Your body uses choline in the building and maintenance of cell membranes. It also uses choline to make acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter involved in memory, muscle control, and nervous system function. In plain language, it helps with the kind of basic communication and structure your body depends on every single day, whether you are paying attention to it or not. Eggs are one of the most notable common food sources of choline, which is part of the reason they deserve far more respect than they usually get NIH Office of Dietary Supplements. Now notice something important here. The most useful nutrients are often not the dramatic ones. They are not the ones that make you feel fireworks in 20 minutes. Many of them are the sort that quietly support systems you only notice when something begins to go wrong. That is why people underestimate them. They are doing maintenance. They are preventing shortage. They are filling in behind the scenes. Human beings are not especially good at giving credit to what works quietly. Vitamin B12 is another part of the story. Your body needs it for red blood cell formation and proper nerve function. It is one of those nutrients that becomes more important the older you get, the more restricted your diet becomes, or the more casually you eat over long stretches of time. Eggs are not the only source of B12, but they are a practical one. They help. And a food that helps consistently is worth more than a food that dazzles occasionally. Harvard Th. Chan School of Public Health. Then there is vitamin A. Not just as a label on a package, but as something your body actually uses. Vision, immune function, tissue maintenance. These are not decorative jobs. They matter. Eggs contribute vitamin A in a form your body can use, and that matters because nutrition is not only about what a food contains on paper. It is about what your body can take from it and put to work. Vitamin D is part of this conversation too, and it deserves honesty. Eggs are not a magical solution to low vitamin D. I am not going to pretend one breakfast changes winter by itself, but eggs are one of the few ordinary foods that naturally contain some vitamin D, and when you look at how few foods bring any at all, that becomes worth noticing. Vitamin D matters for bone health and works with calcium in ways people often talk about too loosely. Here again, the egg is not a miracle, it is a contributor. But do not underestimate a contributor when most diets are full of pretenders. Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And then there are lutein and zeaxanthin, two compounds that many people do not hear about until much later than they should. These are carotenoids found in the yolk, and they are associated with eye health. That does not mean an egg is some grand rescue mission for your eyesight. I will not say what I cannot stand behind, but it does mean that the yolk contains more than taste and color. There is useful value there, which is one more reason throwing the yolk away as though it were the disposable part of the egg makes very little sense for most people. Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Let me stay with the yolk for a moment, because that is where so much confusion has lived. For years, many people were taught to treat the yolk as the problem. Keep the white, throw away the center, and call that progress. But nutrition is rarely improved by fear alone. The yolk is where much of the nutrition sits. The choline, the fat-soluble vitamins, the carotenoids. This is not waste material. This is not the unfortunate part you must endure to get to the healthy section. In the whole egg, the different parts are doing different jobs. The white brings protein. The yolk brings a great deal of the micronutrient value and the fats that help carry certain nutrients where they need to go. When people strip food down to one talking point, they often lose the intelligence of the whole thing. Now I know what people ask next, because they have asked it for years. What about cholesterol? This is where people tend to want a dramatic answer, and I am not going to give one. I am going to give you the useful answer instead. Eggs do contain dietary cholesterol. That part is true. But the old idea that eating cholesterol automatically and directly creates the same kind of trouble in your blood in a simple one-to-one way turned out to be too crude. For most healthy people, dietary cholesterol has a smaller effect on blood cholesterol than the overall pattern of fats in the diet, and moderate egg intake is generally not associated with higher heart disease risk in healthy individuals. That said, context still matters. Some people do need more caution, especially depending on diabetes, cardiovascular risk, or individual response. That is exactly why Dr. John matters more than a stranger with a microphone. Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And I want to pause there because this is important. A balanced answer is usually a more trustworthy answer than a dramatic one. If someone tells you eggs are poison, I do not believe them. If someone tells you eggs are perfection and everyone should eat piles of them without thinking, I do not believe them either. Real life is usually more sensible than either extreme. For many people, a whole egg a day can fit perfectly well into a healthy diet. For some people, the broader medical picture matters. That is not fear, that is maturity. Now let us leave the laboratory for a moment and go back to ordinary life, because that is where food proves itself. There are people who do not need a spreadsheet to know a meal helped them. They know because they did not crash. They know because they were not scavenging at 10:30. They know because lunch arrived and they were still in possession of themselves. The body gives plain feedback if you are willing to pay attention to plain signals. This is one reason eggs have stayed in kitchens across generations. They are not glamorous, but they are reliable. They can be cooked quickly. They can be cooked softly. They can be paired with bread, vegetables, oats, beans, yogurt, fruit, rice, or whatever else your home and culture put on the table. They are one of the least fussy, useful foods a person can keep around. And there is another part of this nobody should be embarrassed to mention: cost. A lot of nutrition advice is written as though money is an afterthought. It is not. It is the difference between a habit and a fantasy. The best food in the world is not much use as guidance if people cannot buy it consistently. Eggs matter partly because they are nutrient-dense, but also because they are reachable. Reachable food changes lives more often than aspirational food. A working person can keep eggs in the house. A parent trying to feed a family can keep eggs in the house. A student can keep eggs in the house. Somebody recovering their eating habits after years of chaos can keep eggs in the house. That matters more than some people in nutrition are willing to admit. When a food is affordable, available, quick, and useful, it stops being a theory and starts becoming a tool. And that may be one reason so many people overlook it. We are strangely tempted to think the answer must be expensive if it is going to be effective. We are suspicious of the plain thing. We think if a food has been there for generations, surely somebody would have made more noise about it if it were really that valuable. But noise and value are not the same thing. Most noise follows money, novelty, and repeat marketing. A simple egg does not need a campaign to exist. It just keeps showing up and doing the work. I remember the way certain foods were treated in older households, and there is a lesson in that. The foods people reached for when they were trying to impress visitors were not always the same foods they reached for when they were trying to strengthen someone. There is a world of difference between celebration food and restoration food. When a person was run down, tired, not quite ill but not fully themselves either, the household tended to move toward foods that were soft, simple, nourishing, and easy to use. Eggs lived in that world, not because somebody wrote a wellness manifesto about them, but because experience teaches what theory later tries to explain. That kind of inherited wisdom should not be worshipped blindly. Old ideas can be wrong, but neither should it be dismissed merely because it is old. Sometimes people who never used the word macronutrient still understood what left a person steadier than before. And maybe that is one reason the egg keeps surviving every nutrition fashion that comes and goes. It is not built on trend, it is built on usefulness. Now, if you want the truth about what most people actually notice when they begin eating eggs more regularly, let me give it to you without pretending too much. Some people notice better fullness in the morning. Some notice that their breakfast feels more complete. Some notice less urge to snack. Some notice it becomes easier to hit decent protein intake without overthinking every meal. Some notice nothing dramatic at all, only that their mornings become less chaotic. And that is enough. Food does not have to create a dramatic feeling to be doing something worthwhile. Sometimes the win is not excitement. Sometimes the win is stability. And stability is terribly undervalued in a culture trained to chase spikes. The internet loves the shocking before and after. Human health is usually built on smaller shifts. The breakfast that reduces the next bad choice. The protein source that shows up repeatedly. The affordable food you can continue buying. The meal that does not leave you searching for comfort an hour later. These are not glamorous transformations, but they are the kind that compound. One egg cannot save a wrecked lifestyle. Let us be adults about that. If someone is sleeping badly, eating poorly all day, never moving, drowning in stress, and then places one egg on top of that chaos, the egg is not a magician. But inside an otherwise decent pattern, or as the beginning of a better pattern, it can play a meaningful role. That is the tone I trust. Not worship, not dismissal, usefulness. Another thing the egg does well is remove friction. And friction matters more than motivation. People imagine they need inspiration to eat better. Often what they need is fewer obstacles. Eggs cook fast. They work in many meals. They are easy to portion. They fit breakfast, lunch, dinner, or a simple snack plate. They do not demand advanced skill. They do not require a shopping list full of exotic items to become edible. They are cooperative food. You do not need to build a lifestyle around eggs. You only need to stop pretending they are too ordinary to count. If you are someone who constantly starts the day with toast alone, cereal alone, sweet-baked things, or coffee that is somehow expected to stand in for breakfast, then the egg is especially worth your attention. Not because it is trendy, because it can pull your breakfast closer to actual nourishment with very little effort. Sometimes progress begins when one food starts doing a job the rest of the meal was not doing. And let me say something here for people who have become anxious around food. You do not need to turn this into a ritual of fear. You do not need to weigh every gram. You do not need to turn your kitchen into an interrogation room. If Dr. John has not given you a reason to avoid eggs, and if they suit your body well, then there is nothing strange about letting a whole egg become one of your regular sensible foods. Cook it in a way you can live with. Soft-boiled, gently scrambled, poached, folded into vegetables, served beside beans, laid over rice, paired with whole grain toast, or eaten with leftovers from last night's dinner if that is how your home works. The healthiest food is often the food you will actually prepare repeatedly. And yes, I said gently, not because an egg is fragile in some theatrical way, but because good food is often handled better when it is not blasted to death. A softly cooked egg is satisfying in a way an overdone one is not. It feels more like a meal and less like punishment. People laugh at details like that, but details decide habits. Now let me give you the deeper reason this food keeps earning its place. Eggs have a kind of nutritional honesty that many modern foods do not. They are not pretending to be nourishing, they simply are. They do not arrive with a list of claims printed on the front in large hopeful letters. They do not need added fiber, added color, added branding language, and smiling promises. They show up already useful. That simplicity does something psychologically important. It restores trust. A person who has grown tired of being marketed to begins to relax around plain food. They stop feeling handled. They stop feeling like somebody is trying to sell them an identity. They can simply eat. And when people feel less manipulated, they often make better choices. This may also explain part of the emotional power around eggs. They feel old enough to trust. Familiar enough not to fear, flexible enough not to resent, useful enough to repeat. In a strange way, they lower resistance. They are one of the few health-supportive foods that rarely asks a person to become a different kind of person in order to use them. That is no small thing. Now, I do not want to leave you with philosophy alone. I want to give you something practical. If you want to test whether eggs deserve a more regular place in your mornings, do not turn it into a life sentence. Do not declare a new identity. Do not announce a challenge to the world. Quietly try this. For the next 10 to 14 mornings, have one whole egg as part of breakfast. Not egg whites only unless Dr. John has specifically told you otherwise. A whole egg. Pair it with something reasonable. Then notice the middle of your morning. Notice whether you are calmer around food. Notice whether the usual hunger arrives with the same force. Notice whether it becomes easier to wait for lunch without feeling deprived. Notice whether breakfast feels more finished. That is a better test than hype. Your own day will tell you more than a loud opinion will. And if you do not notice anything, then you have learned something honest. Not every useful food lands the same way in every life, but many people will notice something. Not a miracle, not lightning, something better than that. They will notice less drift, more steadiness, better footing. That is how good habits earn their place. Quietly, I also want to say one last word about fear, because fear has distorted this conversation for years. Some people are still carrying old nutrition panic around with them, especially about yolks, fats, and cholesterol, even though the broader conversation has become more nuanced. Others have swung too far the other way and now talk as though any traditional food must automatically be beyond question. Neither attitude helps much. A better attitude is this: understand the food, understand your body, understand your context, and let Dr. John handle what is individual while you handle what is practical. That is enough wisdom for one kitchen. Food should not always feel like a courtroom. Sometimes it should feel like care, and eggs for many people belong firmly in the category of care. Not because they are magical, not because they erase every bad habit, not because one food solves all problems, but because they bring protein, choline, useful fats, vitamins, carotenoids, satiety, convenience, and affordability together in a form so simple that people are tempted to overlook it. Do not overlook the simple thing just because it is simple. A great many people spend years chasing health in dramatic places while ordinary strengths sit right under their hand. So the next time you crack an egg, do not think of it as backup food or filler or something to eat only when you have no plan. Think of it as one of the most practical pieces of nourishment a person can keep in reach. Think of it as one of those rare foods that is modest in appearance and substantial in effect. Think of it as a food that asks very little from you and can still give something meaningful back. And if your body does well with it, if Dr. John has given you no reason to avoid it, then perhaps the smartest thing is not to argue about it endlessly at all. Perhaps the smartest thing is to cook it, eat it, and pay attention, because sometimes the truth about a food does not reveal itself in theory first. Sometimes it reveals itself at 10 in the morning, when you realize you are still steady. Sometimes it reveals itself in the ease of making one decent meal instead of one more sugary compromise. Sometimes it reveals itself in how repeatable it is, how affordable it is, how naturally it fits into a real life instead of an imaginary one. And sometimes it reveals itself in this simple fact: the foods that quietly support you are often the ones you should learn to value most. Take care of your body sensibly. Take care of your mornings before they become your cravings. Take care of the small choices that decide the larger ones. And if eggs suit you well, give them the respect of using them properly instead of dismissing them for being ordinary. Ordinary has fooled people before.